In this video, I'm going to talk all about the history of the Arizona Diamondbacks, one of the young up-and-coming teams in the National League, and also a young team in terms of history. Stick with me and I'll tell you all about where they came from. What is going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. The Arizona Diamondbacks were a team that made the World Series last year as a really young team to represent the National League. They definitely weren't the best team in the league, but they have a promising future coming up. And because they were the National League pennant winners, I wrote this history and I've been sitting on it for the last couple months, waiting for the right time to put it out. I figured there's no better way to jump into the 2024 season than sharing the history of the National League pennant winner from last year. Now, the Diamondbacks franchise is one of the two youngest franchises in Major League Baseball, coming into the league in 1998 along with the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. But the history of baseball in Phoenix goes way back, much further than 1998. As early as 1946, several teams were using Phoenix as their spring training area because of the incredible weather that they had in February and March. So it was an ideal place for them to train. And as the league expanded out west in the 1950s and 1960s with teams moving like the Dodgers and Giants, and more teams coming into the league like the Padres and Angels, the Phoenix area was a perfect spot for all of these teams to convene for spring training every year. And what happened at the same time is Phoenix started to expand from the 1940s, where they were a smaller city, but up until the 1990s when they became the 8th largest metropolitan area in the United States. As a result of the prime location for baseball and the growth of the city, Phoenix was constantly talked about by the late 1980s as one of the landing spots for a new franchise in Major League Baseball. Expansion was first seriously considered in the 1980s when the owners of the AAA affiliate for the San Francisco Giants, the Phoenix Firebirds, decided to try convincing Major League Baseball to expand into Phoenix. They approached the St. Louis Cardinals football team to move to Phoenix and share a stadium that would help to bring baseball and football both to the Phoenix area. But baseball couldn't gain enough traction, so the Cardinals football team decided to sign a long-term lease with Arizona State University to share their facilities to move the St. Louis Cardinals to become the Arizona Cardinals. And that ended that short-lived attempt at first bringing a baseball team to the Phoenix area. But just 5 years after that, the next serious bid was put together by Jerry Colangelo, the owner of the Phoenix Suns. Because of Colangelo's close ties with friends like Jerry Reinsdorf, owner of the Chicago White Sox, and Bud Selig, owner of the Milwaukee Brewers at that time, he was so certain of getting the bid for an expansion franchise in Phoenix that he put out a one-page ad in the newspaper to have a competition to name the new team before the team had even been announced. The name finalists were the Diamondbacks, the Coyotes, the Phoenix, the Rattlers, and the Scorpions. Can you imagine a team called the Phoenix? I'm sure they would have called it the Arizona Phoenix, but whatever. Of course, the Coyotes would eventually become the name for the hockey franchise in Arizona, but the prospective team owners chose Diamondbacks over the other names like Scorpions and Rattlers. The bid for the new team was finally confirmed once and for all in March of 1995, and the new team would be starting in time for construction for their new stadium for the 1998 season. Colangelo decided to name the team the Arizona Diamondbacks rather than Phoenix Diamondbacks to gain regional support for the team across the state of Arizona. And of course, at that time, most Arizona residents were fans of the Padres or the Dodgers or the Angels, the closest teams in Southern California. And so by naming them the Arizona Diamondbacks, he was hoping to carve out support for the future team across the state and maybe change some loyalty of old-time fans. Initially, the Rays and the Diamondbacks were supposed to both be assigned to the American League. But a number of the stronger teams in the American League opposed having to have so much travel to the West Coast and odd start times for games for the East Coast fans. And so after a lot of protesting, the Diamondbacks were eventually placed into the National League instead. And to juggle things so that the teams were even in both leagues, the Milwaukee Brewers actually moved from the American League to the National League at the same time that the Diamondbacks became a team. And unlike the vast majority of expansion franchises, the Diamondbacks were successful almost immediately. They did finish in last place in their first season of existence, but they zoomed to a 100-win season in their second year in 1999 and a first-place finish in their division. They managed to finish in first place 3 out of their first 5 seasons between 1999 and 2002. So how did they manage to have so much success early on? Well, they made some key moves really early in their franchise, like signing fireball free agent lefty Randy Johnson to a major contract before their second season in 1999, a contract that would certainly pay off for the team. They traded for Curt Schilling from Philadelphia prior to the 2000 season, and they traded for Luis Gonzalez from the Detroit Tigers as well. And in only their fourth season of existence in 2001, the Arizona Diamondbacks managed to reach the World Series for the first time. And not only reach it, in perhaps one of the most exciting World Series in the history of baseball, they managed to beat the juggernaut New York Yankees in Game 7 to take home their first World Series title as well. At the time, they became the fastest expansion team to win a championship in the 4 major sports, and they were the first Arizona-based team to also bring home a national championship. But of course, all these new free agents, trades, and winning the World Series came at a cost. In order to build a winner so quickly, Colangelo had sold out his team's future by agreeing to defer the contracts of many of those major players over the next 8 years. This caused the Diamondbacks to be financially handcuffed by the mid-2000s, as over $150 million was owed in back salary by 2004 to these top players. They finished 2004 with a record of 51 wins and 111 losses, a big departure from the success they had had in only 3 years after the winning the World Series. During the 2004 season, Colangelo was forced out because of his decisions that he had made, and he sold his interest. Ken Kendrick, a pretty major player in the baseball card collecting world, was placed as the managing general partner for the team, a position that he still holds, and Jeff Morad was named as CEO and head of operations. Now, after losing over 100 games in 2004, the team went into rebuild mode and brought up a lot of young players, including Brandon Webb, who would have 3 phenomenal seasons between 2006 and 2008, including winning the Cy Young Award in 2006 and 2 straight second-place finishes in 2007 and 2008. If you don't know the name Brandon Webb, look up his stats. He was a great pitcher in his prime. Those young players are the ones that helped the Dbacks to reach the playoffs in 2007, but they'd be swept by the Rockies in the playoffs, and they took a nosedive again in 2008, including losing Brandon Webb to a mysterious career-ending shoulder injury, just shy of his 30th birthday after pitching only 6 seasons in the big leagues. This guy was on a future Hall of Fame path if he had just been able to stay healthy. The team would continue to underperform for most seasons between 2008 and 2022, hovering around just above or just below 500 for most of those seasons. Their bright spot was a fluky first place finish in 2011, and their low spot was a 110 loss season in 2021. This era of Diamondbacks baseball was led generally by superb seasons from guys like Paul Goldschmidt, trading for Ketel Marte, and a short period of Zach Greinke pitching in the desert. The last decade and a half of mediocrity has led up to 2023, where once again they were hovering around or just over 500 for most of the season. And they finished in second place behind the Los Angeles Dodgers, but second place was still 16 games back behind the Dodgers. But that second place finish was still good enough to squeeze in for the 6th and final spot in the playoffs in 2023. And behind a really young core of incredible talent in the Arizona desert, they were able to run the board in the National League playoffs by beating the Brewers, the Dodgers, and making it to the World Series for the second time in 2023, where they would lose to the Texas Rangers. So that brings us up to date with a short history of the Diamondbacks. Usually I'd talk about stadiums next. They've only had the one that was built in the late 1990s to support the team coming to Phoenix. Originally named Bank One Ballpark, or BOB for short, it was built in time for the 1998 inaugural season. Most importantly, the stadium had a retractable roof installed to protect the players and the fans from the hottest temperatures of any city hosting a Major League Baseball team. And they put a fancy pool in the outfield as well that people can watch the game from. The BOB was renamed Chase Field in 2005 when Bank One merged with J.P. Morgan Chase and Company. So the Diamondbacks have made the playoffs a total of 7 times out of 26 seasons, including that strong run between 1999 and 2002 led by Randy Johnson, Curt Schilling, and Luis Gonzalez. And then they did make the playoffs sporadically in 2007, 2011, 2017, and finally in 2023. The team's future is looking bright behind star young players like Corbin Carroll, Zach Gallen, and Ketel Marte. and they've got a lot of young players still up and coming through the minor league system that'll join in the next couple seasons. The Diamondbacks have represented the National League twice in the World Series. The times we mentioned in 2001 when they won and beat the New York Yankees, and this last year in 2023 when they lost to the Texas Rangers. Now let's go through a couple interesting facts about the Diamondbacks. Even though the Diamondbacks have only been around for a very short time, they've still managed to celebrate 3 different no-hitters in their short history. The first was a perfect game thrown by none other than Randy Johnson on May 8th of 2004 against the Atlanta Braves, a game in which he also struck out 13 batters. The next 2 no-hitters were by Edwin Jackson in 2010 and Tyler Gilbert in August of 2021. Madison Bumgarner also threw a 7-inning no-hitter in April of 2021, during a time in which doubleheaders were both shortened to only 7-inning games in response to the COVID pandemic and not wanting to overwork pitchers after spending most of the year on the shelf in 2020. But Major League Baseball does not recognize this game as a no-hitter because they only recognize 9-inning games as official no-hitters. The Diamondbacks have a tradition of jumping into their pool after major wins. And this all started in 2011 on the day that they clinched the National League West Division. But only 2 years later, in 2013, the Diamondbacks' National League West Division rivals, the Los Angeles Dodgers, were visiting Arizona, and they had managed to erase a 9.5 game deficit behind the Diamondbacks to finally clinch first place in their own postseason berth, while in Phoenix. And what did they decide to do? Well, obviously, they ran to jump into the pools themselves. The Diamondbacks could do nothing but watch and seethe as the Dodgers celebrated in their own home stadium. And there wasn't much else that they could do about it, having given up that major lead in the division. The Diamondbacks were able to celebrate once again by taking a dip in the pool when they clinched the division in 2017. But in that same postseason, they went head-to-head against the Los Angeles Dodgers once again, and they were swept aside by the Dodgers. But this time, the Diamondbacks were prepared, and they lined up security all around the pool to prevent the Dodgers from being able to celebrate by jumping into it. And the Diamondbacks were able to finally jump into the pool again to celebrate when they swept aside the Dodgers this time in 2023. Now let's talk team uniforms. The original team colors were designed to represent the Arizona Southwest desert, with turquoise representing the stone that's common to the Southwest, copper, which Arizona is one of the nation's largest producers of, and purple, which was made popular by the Phoenix Suns, also owned by Colangelo at that time. Fans generally fell in love with these uniforms and colors, which were represented by the purple jerseys, black jerseys, and most popular, the pinstripe jerseys. But in 2007, with new ownership, the team wanted to take on a new look as well. So they decided to come up with a new scheme centered around the color Sonora Red. This was considered a color local to Arizona and the desert as well, but the fan reaction typically was negative. Despite that immediate reaction, the Diamondbacks have continued to use the Sonora Red as their base color ever since, with red, white, and black jerseys. Although the color scheme changed significantly in 2007, the Diamondbacks' capital A and snake logos have changed very little in terms of design over time. Now let's move on to major awards. The list of Diamondbacks players that have won major awards is obviously fairly small because of the limited number of seasons available to win. The list of pitchers that have won Cy Youngs is only 2, but they've accounted for 5 different Cy Youngs. Most notably, the awe-inspiring stretch by Randy Johnson, when he won every year between 1999 and 2002, more than paying for the contract that he signed with the Diamondbacks over those 4 years. And then, of course, Brandon Webb in 2006. The Diamondbacks have never had an MVP award winner in their team history. The closest was Paul Goldschmidt, with 3 different top 3 MVP finishes between 2013 and 2017, before going on to win his first MVP award with the Cardinals in 2022. Now, in their short history, the Diamondbacks have also only had 2 players and 1 manager enter the Hall of Fame that have been a part of team history, including Randy Johnson and Roberto Alomar on the playing side, and Alan Trammell as a manager for the team. Only Randy Johnson is in the Hall of Fame with a Diamondbacks hat on his plaque. Because they haven't been around very long, there are very few options for former Diamondbacks players that are even remotely likely to enter the Hall of Fame in the next number of seasons. Almost no one who has played for the Diamondbacks that is currently on the ballot or in the next 5 years of potential balloting has even a remote chance of making it to the Hall of Fame. As for the Veterans Committee, the only player that has a remote chance there is Curt Schilling, if his peers and voters can finally get over his abrasive personality and put him in like he should be. Looking ahead even further into the future, the next possible inductee would be Zack Greinke, who pitched a couple seasons for the Diamondbacks. And of course, Paul Goldschmidt is getting closer and closer to being a lock the more seasons of productivity that he has. Evan Longoria has an outside shot, but it's becoming less and less likely the more his numbers decline in his late 30s. He'll be an interesting case though, because he is so borderline as a player, but I hear his name rumored a lot as a potential future manager, so he could be one of those guys like Joe Torre that had a great career and a managing career, that putting them together could get him into the Hall of Fame eventually. Other than that, the future is quite barren, unless you want to project Corbin Carroll 15 years from now as a potential Hall of Famer, which, by looking at him in his first season, I wouldn't put it past him at all. He's going to be a great player as long as he can remain healthy. The list of best position players in Diamondbacks history, but looking only at the time that they wore the Diamondbacks uniform, I'd have to go number 1 with Paul Goldschmidt. He had a great stretch run for the Diamondbacks in the 2010s. And number 2, I put Luis Gonzalez. Gonzalez had a decent career, but by far his best years were the late 90s and early 2000s with the Diamondbacks. Number 3, I'd probably put Ketel Marte. He's actually been quietly really productive for the team, and he's still in the back half of his prime, so he could have a number of good years to come. Number 4, I would probably put Steve Finley, another really great journeyman that played for a number of teams, but had a strong core of his career while in Arizona. And number 5, you know what, I'm going to pick Corbin Carroll, mostly because I didn't like any of the other options that I was looking at for the number 5 position. And give it another 5 years, I don't think there's any way that Carroll's not going to be in the top 5 best players in Diamondbacks history. Moving on to the 5 best pitchers in Diamondbacks history, the number 1 choice, beyond a doubt, is Randy Johnson, obviously. After that, I would probably put Brandon Webb in his shortened career of only 6 seasons, ahead of a number 3 guy, Curt Schilling. Webb was dominant between 2006 and 2008, and Schilling was dominant in the early 2000s for the Diamondbacks. But Schilling's time in the desert was quite short, whereas Webb had 6 seasons to produce. Schilling is obviously the better pitcher overall in his career, but Webb was the better of the Diamondbacks. The number 4 pitcher is probably Zack Greinke. He pitched a short time, but the Diamondbacks haven't really existed all that long either. And number 5, I'm going to put Zach Gallen. Give it a couple more years of top 5 Cy Young finishes, and Gallen is easily going to be able to pass Greinke and maybe even Schilling and Webb on the list of best Diamondback pitchers. So that's it. That is the short history of the Arizona Diamondbacks. I hope you enjoyed this one. Be sure to check out my other videos on team histories. Share, comment, like, subscribe, everything to help me out. I would much appreciate that. Baseball season is just around the corner, so I wish everybody well. Keep talking baseball, take care of yourself, and we'll see you around.